Hello and good morning to everyone who is joining us today for our latest Benches webinar, which is about biodiversity knowledge and awareness in sport. My name is Matthew Campelli and I'll be your moderator and I'll be your guide during today's presentation, today's webinar. But today we have two fantastic speakers who are going to talk us through today's session. We have Giulia Alessandri from the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies, and she'll be followed by Anna Marlini from the Italian Canoe and Kayak Federation. So today we have a few learning outcomes for the webinar. We'll talk a little bit about what biodiversity means in a sport-specific context. So Anna's presentation will focus really on what biodiversity means for her organization at the Italian Canoe Kayak Federation. And then we'll have some key insights from new research that has been produced and will be delivered by Giulia's part of the presentation. Through the presentation, we'll have a few other learning outcomes like what are the drivers and barriers to action around biodiversity in sport, how biodiversity is currently addressed in sport, and how sport can play a stronger role. Today, we have two speakers with Giulia and Anna. We were supposed to be joined by Bob Ramczak, who is the head of sustainability at World Athletics, but Bob isn't able to join us because he's quite unwell today, and we send on our best wishes to Bob and hope that he gets better soon. Before we kick off, a little bit about the Benches project. This is a 36-month project that's being funded by the European Commission, and it's being coordinated by the technical partner Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies, who Giulia represents. The partners include World Sailing, World Athletics, the Italian Canoe Kayak Federation, who Anna is representing today, the International Biathlon Union, SL Benfica Football Club in Portugal, and Touchline, which is the organization that I represent as the dissemination partner. The project has a few key outcomes. The first one is to support the implementation of nature-based solutions and environmental policies for sports organizations. And it's also about enhancing the knowledge around biodiversity management in sport and sports organizations. Part of the work is around analyzing the current status of biodiversity management and ecosystem services in sport. And a lot of today's presentation will focus on that current status. And the fourth and final aspect is around ensuring sustainability, visibility, and proper dissemination of the project through webinars like this one. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to our first speaker. I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll hand over to Giulia, who will be presenting her work. Giulia, please feel free to unmute yourself and share your screen.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Just 1 second. Okay. Here we are. And now my presentation. Okay. Perfect. Are you able to see my screen? Matthew?
All perfect.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So so I'm going to share you the result that come after a survey regarding biodiversity knowledge and awareness in sport. That is one of the tasks of Benches project. So Matthew has already done perfectly the overview of Benches, so I'm going to skip this part. I just would like to show you where we are at the moment in Benches project. So we have already concluded work package 2. In the last webinar, I talked about measurement of ecosystem service value in sport. We are currently working on the digitalization of the assessment tool to measure biodiversity in sport, and we are currently working on the development of nature-based solutions for sport that are going to be implemented in the further steps by the consortium partner of Benches. Now, I'm going to present you task 4.1 that, as I mentioned before, refer to biodiversity knowledge and awareness in sport. What are the aim of task 4.1? First of all, we want to understand the current level of knowledge and awareness about biodiversity among the managers of sport organizations. To achieve this goal, we have created a survey that has been distributed among the managers of sport organization, thanks to the partner collaboration. We aim to understand the level of the current existing knowledge regarding biodiversity and environmental practices for sport, help organization in conducting kind of a self-assessment regarding biodiversity and environmental management, and stimulate reflection on further aspects, like, for example, that are associated both of environment and biodiversity. For example, the practices adopted, the barriers to the implementation of biodiversity action, the drivers, and also what are the benefits expected by the managers. Why? First of all, because we would like to increase green and biodiversity knowledge and skills in all sport organizations. We would like also to upgrade and upskill and reskill, if possible, green and biodiversity competencies in the entire workforce of the sector. Extend general knowledge among the entire value chain, so we are not only considering the management of sport organization, but also athletes, supporters, procurement managers. Enable transformation, hopefully at individual, organizational, and sectoral level. Build a benchmark, so establish a model to which organization can reference, and exploit and support sport popularity to gather attention on a complex topic like biodiversity and ecosystem service. Before diving into the actual presentation of the result, I just would like to have a little excursus on biodiversity to really explain what we mean when we think about biodiversity, that is actually a niche of environmental friendly practices. Biodiversity is a term that has been established and used for the first time in the 1992 Convention on Biological Diversity, and has been described as the variability among living organisms and ecological complexes of which they are part, that include diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystem. So there are different kinds of biodiversity. The first one is the genetic diversity, so it's the variety of genes within a specific species. Then we have the species diversity. So if we think about a specific ecosystem, there are different kinds of animals, but also of vegetal species inside the same area. And then, of course, we have ecosystem diversity, so the variety of habitats, communities, and ecosystem processes in the biospheres. So we are dealing with forests, we are dealing with deserts, but also with wetlands. There is also a deeper level of complexity if we think about diversity, and is the molecular diversity. This is associated more with biological studies, of course, but basically is the diversity between the sequences of DNA or the forms of RNA or the enzyme or the proteins inside a specific organism, but we are going not to dive in it in this webinar. What is clear is that the biodiversity implies variety. So variety is both a source of richness for a specific environment, but is also an indicator of the level of health of a certain ecosystem. The problem is that this variety has been compromised drastically by anthropogenic activity. There are different indexes that showed how human activities are compromising this variety and this richness in different ecosystems and in nature in general. One of the most famous is the WWF Living Planet Index that has shown that in the last 50 years, there has been a biodiversity loss of almost 73%. And the ecosystems that have been majorly touched are wetlands in particular, and then terrestrial ecosystem. According to the IUCN index, a red list that refers to the species at risk of extinction, we have more than 46,000 of species that are animal, vegetal, that are at risk of extinction. From an academic perspective, there are a lot of authors that are trying to identify what are the major pressure on biodiversity. There are 5 major pressures. The first one is land use change. By land use change, we mean the conversion of natural areas to, according to the needs of society. For example, agricultural fields, orchards, tree farm, but also commercial and industrial sites or residential area. This, of course, cause a loss in terms of in qualitative and in quantitative term because of the fragmentation of the ecosystem of the natural environments. Then we have pollution. By pollution, we mean the contamination of air, of water, of soil, because of polluting substances. There are also more easier phenomena, like, for example, the CO2 emission related to the contamination of air, but also complex phenomena like eutrophication of water. That is usually associated to the production of fertilizers and the use of fertilizers, pesticides, for example, for agricultural purposes, that create an increase of nutrients in wetlands, like nitrogen and phosphorus, that create an algae bloom. And with the deterioration of algae, we have a situation of hypoxia that prevents other species to bloom in the same area, and so a really big loss of biodiversity. Then we have, for example, invasive species that are caused by the introduction on purpose or accidentally of species that are not native of a certain area and that can compromise, of course, the species that are already in the same ecosystem. Climate change, probably one of the most well-known, that is related to anthropogenic activity that cause a rise in temperature of biosphere, lithosphere, hydrosphere. And finally, overexploitation. So uncontrolled use of resources that does not respect the natural rhythm of nature to rebound and to restore itself. According to the same author, there are different strategies that firms can follow or are forced to follow to prevent and to approach biodiversity. The first one, they move through the matrix that you see in the screen. So on one axis, we have location, and on the other one, we have timing. The first strategy is the conservation strategy. So is a before loss and on-site strategy. So is a preventative strategy where the basic assumption is that biodiversity loss is avoidable and business activity can be designed in order to reduce the impact on biodiversity. Restoration strategy instead is after loss and on-site strategy, and they start with the assumption that the commercial of the industrial activity considered is going to impact biodiversity no matter what. What companies can do is trying to restore the ecosystem on which they impact and put it back to the condition that it has before the activity was carried out. Then we have a compensation strategy, so before loss and off strategy, again, a preventative strategy that starts with the idea that an impact that is caused on biodiversity can be counterbalanced by enhancing biodiversity in another geographical area. And then we have reparation. This is more a coercive strategy, let's say, because it's after loss and offsite. So after an organization, an activity has caused a certain damage to biodiversity, is forced to repair to that damage that has been caused. Now we go through the survey result. Just really briefly introducing the methodology. Of course, we created a really flexible survey, first of all, because we are dealing with practitioners, and second, because there are different typologies of sport, ecosystem, and organization involved. The items have been all measured through a Likert scale that ranges from 1 to 5, but we have also decided to add an open question to gather more feedback regarding best practices or good practices implemented by sport organizations that may not have been considered inside the survey. We shared the survey through July and September, and we decided to adopt an elite approach. So we decided to interview, basically to survey the managers of the sport organization. Then the survey is divided in 8 sections and has been translated in English and in Italian. This is just an overview of the 8 sections of the survey, but now I'm going to dive into each section to draw some consideration regarding the result. First of all, the survey obtained a total amount of 173 respondents, and the most represented sector is athletics. Luckily, we have a really good global representativeness since the respondents come from all the 5 continents, even if the majority are from Italy. The most common typology of sport organization is small club with less than 10 dependents, and a good portion of the respondents are also event organizers. The first section trying to establish kind of a baseline, so explore the level of environmental sustainability awareness that is already in place inside the sport organization inquired. According to that, we were able to see that there is a really high level of promotion of organization environmental responsible behavior, not only inside the workforce, so among the staff, but also among the athletes and the external stakeholder. Despite this, there is not enough, according to the people surveyed, involvement regarding local environmental initiative, like, for example, green events or local cleanup project. This is really interesting because it gives a really good room for improvement, because it's important to build a strong bond with local public represented to stimulate innovation, to capitalize knowledge, to build consensus and good reputation, but also to find occasion to establish a really strong network and sharing best practices, increasing the one that organization already own. The second section, instead, is focused on trying to understand how sustainability management competencies are developed inside the organization. Most of the respondents agree on the idea that sustainability management has a really positive impact on general organization performance. And the most important sources to develop environmental performance are related to internal discussion and systematic interaction with external stakeholders, like, for example, university, federation, and other sport organizations. However, there is not a structured methodology inside for formal training of the staff to constantly maintain that update regarding skills and capacity associated to environmental management, and also the participation to dedicated conference and meetings is quite limited. In terms of drivers, instead, to foster biodiversity inside the organization and challenges or barriers experienced by the managers of sport organization, usually the stakeholders that are considered the most important ones to foster biodiversity practices are organizing committees of the events, international and national federation, and local authorities. That's why it's important to strengthen the bond and the network with local organizations. Less important, instead, are considered media and spectators. In terms of barriers, not surprisingly, one of the most critical one is, of course, associated with financial constraints. But the other two ones that we are trying to respond with the result of Bench's product are difficulties in the assessment of biodiversity impacts of sport event. That's why we are creating the tool to measure the biodiversity impact and to learn how to manage correctly biodiversity impact in terms of sport organization. And then the lack of personnel dedicated to biodiversity management inside the organization. Instead, all the organizations reveal a good level of cooperation and good commitment in terms dedicated to biodiversity practices. In terms of biodiversity management action that are already implemented at organizational level, all organizations are strongly committed to biodiversity in the management of the event, and biodiversity is also reported inside the sustainability strategy. Despite this, as we have seen before, again, biodiversity is not systematically included into training programs or into participation to regular local initiative, webinar, workshop. So probably biodiversity is included, but it stays at a more superficial level. It's not really embedded inside the practices and the procedures of the organization involved. In terms of promotion of biodiversity protection in the management of the event or of the sport facility, instead, most recurrent actions are related to reduction of climate change and reduce the consumption of resources, in particular water and energy. While restoration measure or action that refer to procurement management or product traceability are really limited. So as we have seen before, climate change and overexploitation of resources are only two of the possible impact of biodiversity. But for example, invasive species, land use change, and also pollution are not really enough considered. In terms of other best practices that are reported in the open question that we put in the survey, some interesting actions that have been reported by the managers are the definition of awareness-raising campaigns, and these campaigns are frequently involve younger supporters. So, for example, students and local authority. Again, the importance of local authority. Then selection of hotels, for example, at a walk distance from competition venues. Also, the protection of nature that is really close to the venue of the competition. Tree planting action. Posidonia protection, if we think about marine biomes, for example, or not anchor bois, again, to reduce the disturb to wildlife. And then general restorative post-event action to reduce the impact that has been caused, for example, by athletes, crowd, supporters, and so on. To conclude, the last question refers to benefit. So what are the benefits that managers expect from the implementation of biodiversity protection practices? These benefits start with the promotion of natural preservation. That is really good because, of course, it's a really altruistic goal. Then, better reputation and improve relationship with local communities. A really low portion of the manager expect to gain benefit associated to internal efficiency or attraction of new spectators and new supporters. To conclude and to sum up what we have seen throughout this slide, the survey results in general show a really good level of environmental awareness that is really widely consolidated among the sport managers, while biodiversity, that as we have seen is more of a niche, is a portion of environmental awareness, is not enough represented. Is an emerging topic, but is not substantially integrated inside the strategy and the action. Institutional and regulatory pressure, of course, is the main enabler of biodiversity oriented in sport, while spectators and media, as we've seen, are not perceived as much influential in promoting biodiversity action. Most of the barriers refer to financial constraint, but also to the difficulties of assess biodiversity impact, of be enough aware of biodiversity impact of a specific activity, and also lack of dedicated personnel. Even though a consistent number of organizations declare to consider biodiversity in their environmental strategy, we have seen that frequently is only included at a superficial level, but not enough inside procedures, staff training, workshop, webinars, and participation to local initiatives. So what would be important is trying to make a transition from an awareness at a more general level to action at a really deep and substantial level that are linked to the specificity of the sports involved, but also to the impacts on biodiversity. Regarding facility and event management, instead, we have seen that the majority of the action are linked to climate change mitigation and improving resource efficiency. But first of all, we have seen that there are other impacts on biodiversity and other pressure on biodiversity. And also we have to take into account that frequently the sports involved perform inside natural venues, so not inside stadia or artificial arena. So the impact on biodiversity is even stronger. Finally, the respondents associate biodiversity practices mainly with reputational advantage, improved relationship with the local community, and natural preservation. But there are other aspects that maybe should be explored. First of all, fans and supporters are are now more aware than before of the impacts on biodiversity, of the necessity to preserve natural resources. And also, frequently, there are a lot of biodiversity practices that are associated to innovative and interesting aspects that could foster also organization efficiency from different point of view. But this aspect is going to be deepened by Anna, I'm sure, in her presentation. So thank you very much for your attention. I leave the floor to Anna, and we'll see after with the discussion with Matthew.
Thank you very much, Julie. That was a very interesting presentation, and there are a few things that I think we should unpack during the Q&A. I'm very interested in the fact that this kind of, if there is a link between this kind of superficial level of knowledge and the fact that a lot of these sports managers don't see economic efficiency or economic generation as a link with biodiversity. That's a very interesting finding from your study. One thing I forgot to mention at the very beginning of the webinar is that we will have some time for Q&A at the very end, maybe 15-20 minutes. So if there are any questions for Julia based on her work, please feel free to use either the chat or the Q&A box. I'll be checking both, so please ask as many questions as you like, and I'll get through as many as I can. And also please share them for Anna as we go through her presentation as well. Okay, so now we've heard about the research, and now we will hear it from the sport organization point of view. So Anna, I hand the floor to you. Please feel free to unmute your mic and share your screen.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? And
Yep,
can you
looks
hear
good.
me? Yes,
Looks good,
okay.
and we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you, Julia, for your presentation. This is a very important starting point for us as a national federation. I am, so as Matthew told us, I am Anna Merlini from Italy, from Italian Canoe and Kayak Federation. And actually, I'm responsible for the European environmental project. We had already finished one very important project last August, and now we are into benches projects. So I'm going to share my presentation and to show you the point of view of a national federation. We are quite important federation in Italy. We had very important results in terms of environmental improvement in the last 3 years, thanks to this European project. And I would like to start, before to start, I really want to say thank you before to everyone who is here today, this morning, because biodiversity, as Julia told us before, is still weak, and we really need to share this message, this kind of messages, and we really need to involve people in this kind of topic, because we always speak about environmental sustainability, but biodiversity is something different, and we are learning about this topic as National Federation, and we are appreciating the difference between sustainability and biodiversity. So biodiversity is in some way included in environmental sustainability, but we really need to take care about this topic, and we really need to be more practical, how can I say? And so I would like to start from Julia takeaway messages and to confirm that biodiversity is only partially integrated in our governance, in our sustainability management. So starting to understand the state of the art of our institution, it has been the most important thing to do and the most important starting point. So, because it's true, we are aware about this topic, and we have also a lot of issues in relation to biodiversity, because our sport is deep into the nature, and we face sometimes some important problems with the biodiversity, as for example with the invasive species. But in the reality, we are still a very basic point. So we really need to share and to try to do something in the reality, in our, how can I say, in our days, every days. So, and because we have to force in some way this transition, and we have to force this cultural change. So we always speak about environmental awareness, but let's try to move deep into the biodiversity. So I start from our experiences, because I think that maybe for someone of you could be interesting to see how a national federation deal with this kind of topic, and with a very easy action, we are doing something different, and we are giving, we are showing, I think, quite a good way to approach all these topics. So last year, as I told you before, we ended with this project, DEC project. Maybe someone of you already know this project. And that project was focused on environmental sustainability, and in particular on the sustainability of event, kayak event, in general sport events, but we focus on the kayak event. We achieve several important results, but the most important result is, of course, in relation to the development of the sustainability rating tool that we applied in Milan during the Sprint World Championship in August. And basically, we receive a sort of picture of our environmental governance and environmental organization in relation to the World Championship. So the result, the sustainability rating tool gave us this picture, and so we are quite good. We are in the red light, proactive situation. So not bad. So you can see different environmental area that we analyzed, and as you can see, among all these environmental dimension, the biodiversity is the lowest dimension. And so this, it was quite obvious, because if I have to say about our organization in relation to the World Championship, so I can say that we didn't pay too much attention to biodiversity, and also the analysis gave us this answer. So not a surprise, of course. And as you can see from our data, so we are very good in mobility management, or in food and beverage management, as well as in waste management. So sometimes we focus always on waste management, but maybe we have already done everything that we could done, and nothing about biodiversity, nothing particular in biodiversity action. So we have to start from this data, this information, and benches has been the opportunity to start thinking about something different. And as Julia said before, that biodiversity is fundamental, is variety. So we have to start also from this word. So also our sport is variety, and we depend on different ecosystem, because as a kayak sport, but in general as paddle sport, we can practice our sport in rivers, lakes, the sea, or even in urban context. So each this ecosystem has obviously a different biodiversity situation, and we are going to impact this biodiversity situation in different way. So first of all, we have to take into the account these important differences that we have inside our sports. And then we have to remember that we have different disciplines that are different in terms of impact on biodiversity. For example, if we do a race of sprint kayak, we will have a completely different mobility if we compare to wild water or ocean racing events. So we have a real differences between disciplines in terms of impact on biodiversity and, of course, on environmental sustainability in general. And another important thing to think about is that we are a country that presents a lot of differences in terms of territory. So our Italian territory is very, very different from north to south. And so we are not so large, but we have everything from the Alps to Sicily. And we have a very, very different ecosystem in our country. And we have to take into the account this data because yes, for sure, we have to think about biodiversity and how to improve, how to protect, but we have to consider that we have a completely different situation. So if we want to give some kind of solution or propose actions to local club, local institution that say, okay, we want to move in this direction, but how can we do this kind of action? So we have to consider that we have to propose a different solution from north to south because we are all different, and this is our force as well as in biodiversity definition. But of course, is also our challenge as a federation. So how we deal with these differences that we have inside our countries? Well, we started again from DEC results, and in particular, we started from the awareness campaign that we perform at the end of the DEC project. And basically, we use the same structure. So we involve local club, and we match each local club with at least one local school. Some clubs had more than one schools, and we cover all the territory. So from north of Italy to the whole Italy, and included also the two big islands, Sardinia and Sicily. And we involve like 4,000 students in this project. And for us, has been a very successful project, of course, and it was focused on environmental sustainability. So as you can see in this picture, we divided the project in two parts. The first part was inside the school, indoor lesson with specialists speaking about environmental sustainability. Of course, we were in primary schools, so very easy terms and words, but very practical actions. So we focus on waste collection, how to separate waste and how to deal with waste. But most important, more important, was the concept of reducing the use of resources. So this was our focus inside the school. And of course, since the second objective, the second focus was to bring students to practice sport, we conclude our project in the water, in the clubs, and we had at the same time like 4,000 students practicing kayak during the school year. So this has been very, very successful for us. And the main idea for this new project is to use the same structure, but move from sustainability to biodiversity, proposing a so-called natural-based solution. Before, Giulia told about the work packages that we are facing during the project, and now we are in the phase that in the work packages where we have to develop a natural-based solution. So we are thinking about more governance, natural-based solution that I prefer the more practical solution like this, and this in relation to school and clubs is our new solution. Now I'm going to show which is our proposed natural-based solution. And this kind of action is going to improve the school network through the Italian clubs, through the Italian school, and in order to improve our biodiversity awareness. Our natural-based solution is very easy and very romantic if you want to say, because we are going to realize benches point. Each clubs and each schools will be realized a geolocalized butterfly flower bed cultivated by by athletes, students, technicians, and why not also by manager of local school or local club. I say romantic because we are going to speak about flower and butterfly. So it's in some way an action very, very easy to realize, focusing on pollination and pollinator, because we need to preserve our base of our life, and sometimes we forget about the ordinary action. So we are often, I saw in many different projects or action, also in relation with the National Federation, that we are every looking for something wow or something very, very impactful in terms of communication and so on. But sometimes it's necessary to focus on local and on easy action to do. So we decided to propose to every clubs and abinetti associated with school to realize this butterfly flower bed that will include specific species attracting pollinators such as bees and butterflies, and why not also bats, if we are good enough to attract also bats. And the most important thing for us as National Federation is that the butterfly flower bed will be geolocalized and monitored by clubs, of course, but also by Federation. So the Federation is going to do this effort to control in some way and to monitor the development of this action, because of course I am very very proud of this simple initiative, and we are excited to start with this kind of action. But of course we have to see if our proposal is good enough to create a sort of network of benches points geolocalized all over the Italian territory. And of course, this flower bed will be identified by Bench's logos. So this is basically our simple idea, and I show you some very easy picture because as I told you before, will be easy to create and to maintain, and this is going to because before Giulia told us that sometimes we have also financial barriers that don't allow us to develop some specific actions. Well, in this way, in this case, we don't have any financial problems because every club, every school can realize this butterfly flower bed as they prefer, considering the differences of the school in the Alps or the school in the southern part of Sicily. Of course, we will have different species, different animals that will be attracted by our flower bed, and we have to monitor these kind of differences. And so the objective of this, I repeat and I repeat again, of this easy action is, first of all, provide habitat and resources to the overall biodiversity of an ecosystem and making it more resilient and healthy. This is the main objective. And then we can act also on the soil health, improve air quality if we are in an urban area, because sometimes we have clubs also in urban context. So if you think about some artificial channel that cross the city, maybe your flower bed could be the only green point that you are in that specific area, and could be an important biodiversity point. And for another, of course, another important objective focus that we want to achieve is to increase the biodiversity awareness. Because to do this, to create this kind of object, it's not difficult, but we need to take care and we need to be constant during the summer, the spring. So we plan to start at the end of March with these actions, and of course we will expect to have a sort of boom in the creation and in the first period. But the most important part is to maintain and to follow up the flower bed also during the summer, autumn, and so on. We really would like to have a sort of instrument, not only for young students or athletes, but also for adults, because the example comes from us, as adults, and we have to show the correct way to improve our actions. So I think, okay, so that's it. And I think that, okay, yes, I had also this last picture. And so I put here two pictures that I really like, because we have a bee on the flower, and a group of athletes and students. Yes, this was a school, and at the same way we are in a sort of equilibrium, and we have to respect every time we go deep into the nature to do, in this case, our beautiful sport that is kayak. And so I really want to thank you Matthew, Julia, and in general the Benches project, because we are doing very well and we are improving our knowledge and our way to practice sport in the nature. And as Kayak Federation, we are strongly dependent on this type of topics. So that's it, and thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you very much, Anna, for a very, very interesting presentation. It's fantastic to hear that you educated 4,000 children. That was a very nice story. And it was also very interesting to hear about the different geographies, the different climates, the different landscapes across Italy, and how you have to take that into account when you're doing these projects, which I thought was a very, very interesting part of the of your presentation. So we have a few minutes for questions. We have one or two questions in the box, but I think we have time for a few more. So please feel free to ask them. We've got one question here for you, Julia, which is from Ugo. And while Anna was giving her presentation, I tried to condense it. So I think Ugo is asking, he's quite surprised by the high percentage of sports managers who say they've got a high awareness for biodiversity. And he's asking, do you think, or do you assume that there is a difference between their stated knowledge, what they think they know about biodiversity, and what their actual knowledge is, and what should we take from that?
Thank you, Ugo, for the question. Yes, even if I'm an academic, so I speak from an academic perspective, there is a bias that is associated to this kind of survey, that is the difference between stated preference, so what people declare effectively, and revealed preference, so what people actually do. So usually there are survey rely on the first category, so on state preference, so there is always a bias. To achieve the reveal preference, there are different studies that are associated to discrete choice experiments, for example, or choosing between alternatives. But to solve this bias and trying to avoid solution that would have required a lot more timing and a lot more of efforts also for respondents, we're trying to start with general question that trying to inquiry environmental practices and biodiversity knowledge, and then actually dive in and tell them, okay, you say you include biodiversity, but what are you actually doing? And then at the point we understood that even if biodiversity at a general level is included in strategies, environmental friendly strategies and practices, they are not effectively action. And in fact, what the majority of the respondents said is that they have difficulties in assess what are the impacts on biodiversity of their activities, and they lack of personnel dedicated to measurement of biodiversity impacts. So I hopefully answer your question in terms of difference between revealed and state preference.
Thanks, Julia. And if anyone has any sort of longer questions, please feel free to share them, and I'll share them with both Julia and Anna, and they can respond to you. They can respond to you in their own time. I have a question quickly for both of you, which really came through in the both presentations. I'll start with you, Julia, but it's around. So we talk about climate, we talk about resource efficiency, and those seem to be more easier to address for sport than topics like biodiversity. And Anna, you mentioned it in your presentation that your federation is very high up with many other aspects like mobility and food and beverage, and biodiversity was more difficult. So why is biodiversity more difficult for sport? Maybe Julia, you can go first, and then Anna, you can give us your perspective from the Sport Federation. Please, Julia.
Is difficult because, as I said before, biodiversity is a niche, actually, so is a component of environmental friendly action, of environmental awareness. So it requires, according to my opinion, of course, a deeper level of understanding of the topic. And since sometimes organizations still struggle in promoting environmental protection, environmental friendly action, going even through more in depth and focusing on aspects that are associated to biodiversity, so protection of richness of species, protection of variety, is even more complex. And another thing that I've seen throughout audit and throughout study is that frequently it's difficult for organizations to understand the impact on biodiversity. So think that the action they are conducting could potentially impact on biodiversity, could be potentially harmful for natural animal and vegetal species. So I think this is the further step that should be made. So trying to understand that a general environmental impact has an even deeper biodiversity impact that, as I mentioned before, is just a niche, a point of environmental actions.
Thanks, Julia. And what about your perspective, Anna, from a sports organization?
Yes, I think that this is the topic. Julia is perfect, right? Because we always focus in general on environmental sustainability because, first of all, because we have a lot of information on action solution that we already tested, and so we have a lot of bibliography and so on. We have very few information about the impact of our everyday action on biodiversity. And this, I think, this is the most important issue to solve. So understand that every single action that we put today in our practice is going to, in some way, to impact biodiversity. And even in a small local club, if I think not too big or large events. So we have already finished Olympic Games, so we could open a very big talk about the impact on biodiversity. But this is something so clear that, okay, we all agree about the impact on biodiversity of this kind of events. But the problem, I think, but we have Olympic Games every 4 years. The problem is when you impact biodiversity every single day with every action that you put in your local situation. And so, for example, in kayak, we have always the moment that we have to dive into the water to put our boat in the water. And of course, in that area, we are in some way impact our biodiversity. Or I don't know, I have many other examples, but it is important to have information, first of all, and to share this kind of information. And I think that benches is going in the right direction because we are trying to do this kind of action of awareness raising also. That is the most important part.
Thanks, Anna. We have a question here from Axel and Tara, who are asking if there's any information, sources, studies on the impact of major sporting events on host cities, regions in terms of sustainability. I'm sure that after this we can get some sources, then we can share with you, Axel. We have your email address, so if there's any specific sources that you would like, I'm sure we can send over some information following this webinar. So we're coming to the end now. We've only got a minute or so left, so it probably makes sense to close off the webinar. So I just want to say a big thank you to Julia and Anna for a fantastic webinar, for sharing some really interesting information with us. And a big thank you to all of you who joined us today, spent an hour with us and to go through all this information. And thank you very much for your questions. Our next Benches webinar, I think, will be in mid-May to celebrate the International Day of Biological Diversity. So please keep an eye out for that on LinkedIn and other social channels. But until then, thank you very much. Goodbye, and I hope everyone takes care. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Hope
Thank
you
you.
enjoyed
Bye.
it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your participation. Thank you.